The stagecoach rattled through the mountain pass, each turn sending passengers swaying against worn leather seats. Snow still clung to the peaks, though spring had begun its slow awakening in the valley below. Emma Wilson clutched her daughter's small hand, both to comfort the child and to steady herself against the lurching of the coach. Little Lily had fallen asleep despite the rough journey, her head resting in her mother's lap. Dark curls splayed across the faded blue of Emma's traveling dress. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Through the soot-streaked window, Pine Ridge finally appeared, a collection of wooden buildings nestled against the backdrop of towering Colorado mountains. This small frontier town represented everything Emma had risked for: a fresh start, a new life, a chance to leave grief behind. The letters tucked in her reticule promised as much. Correspondence from William Crawford, a successful merchant seeking a bride. His words had painted a picture of prosperity, respectability, and most importantly, acceptance. What those letters didn't contain was the truth about Lily. Emma had mentioned being widowed, but not that she came with a child. She'd convinced herself it wouldn't matter once he met them both, once he saw how well-behaved and sweet her daughter was. The decision to withhold this information haunted her now as the coach slowed, wheels grinding against packed earth. Pine Ridge, 20 minutes. The driver called down, his voice as rough as the terrain they'd traversed. Emma smoothed her travel-wrinkled skirts, adjusted her simple bonnet, and gently woke Lily. "We're here, sweetheart. Remember what we talked about best behavior for Mr. Crawford." The child nodded solemnly, too tired to speak. Emma gathered their one small trunk, her heart hammering against her ribs with each passing moment. Everything they owned was in that trunk. That and the locket around her neck, containing a faded daguerreotype of her late husband. The stagecoach rolled to a stop before the town's only hotel, dust billowing around them as Emma stepped down, Lily in her arms. A small crowd had gathered. Stagecoach arrivals were still events in frontier towns like Pine Ridge. Emma scanned the faces, searching for the one that matched the description in his letters. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a neatly trimmed beard. She found him immediately. William Crawford stood apart from the others, his suit finer than those around him, boots polished to a shine that seemed impossible in this dusty outpost. He was handsome in a hard way, his features sharp and authoritative. But it was his eyes that caught Emma's attention, calculating, assessing her like merchandise. When those eyes shifted to Lily, they froze over entirely. "Mr. Crawford," Emma said, stepping forward with what she hoped was a confident smile. "I'm Emma Wilson. Your letters have been a great comfort during our journey." For a long moment, he said nothing. The crowd around them had grown quiet, sensing the tension. Finally, Crawford spoke, his voice carrying easily to those gathered. "You didn't mention a child in your letters, Mrs. Wilson." Emma swallowed hard. "I know I should have. I hoped once you met Lily, you would see what a blessing she is." Crawford's jaw tightened. "I arranged for a wife, Mrs. Wilson. Not a ready-made family." His eyes flicked to her simple dress, the worn trunk, especially not one that appears to bring little else to the arrangement. A woman in the crowd whispered audibly, "Poor Mr. Crawford, deceived before she even arrived." Heat rushed to Emma's cheeks as she set Lily down, keeping the child's hand firmly in hers. "Mr. Crawford, please, we've traveled so far. Perhaps we could discuss this privately." "There's nothing to discuss." He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a folded paper. "This was our agreement. Nowhere does it mention a child." He tore the paper in two, letting the pieces flutter to the ground. "I have my reputation in this town. I need a proper wife, not someone who arrives with Complications. Lily pressed against Emma's skirts, her small face crumpling in confusion. The whispers around them grew louder, faces turning away in second-hand embarrassment or worse, judgment. Emma felt the ground shift beneath her feet, all her careful plans dissolving like sugar in hot tea. "We spent everything to get here," she said, voice barely audible. Crawford adjusted his coat, already turning away. "That's unfortunate, but not my concern. The hotel might have work for you cleaning, perhaps." With that parting suggestion, more insult than help, he walked away, the crowd parting before him. Emma stood motionless, the mountain air suddenly too thin to breathe. A few onlookers lingered, their curiosity not yet satisfied by her public humiliation. The stagecoach driver had already unloaded their trunk and was preparing to continue his route. "Mama?" Lily tugged at her hand. "Are we going to our new house now?" The question broke something in Emma. She knelt beside her daughter, forcing a smile that felt like it might shatter her face. "Not today, sweetheart. We're going to find somewhere else to stay for a while." Hours later, as dusk settled over Pine Ridge, Emma sat on a wooden bench outside the livery stable, Lily asleep against her shoulder. The hotel had been full, or so they claimed when she inquired about a room. The saloon wouldn't allow a child. The boarding house required payment up front, more than the few coins remaining in Emma's purse. They'd spent the afternoon wandering from door to door, met with either outright rejection or pitying refusals. Crawford's influence was evident in each interaction. No one would risk his displeasure by helping the woman who had tried to deceive him. By sunset, Emma had accepted the livery owner's grudging permission to spend one night in the relative shelter of the stable's covered porch, out of the worst of the mountain night's chill. She shifted Lily's weight, arm numb from holding her. Their trunk sat beside them, unopened. What had seemed like their life's necessities that morning now felt like an anchor, too heavy to carry but impossible to abandon. The sound of boots on the wooden walkway made Emma tense. She'd already endured too many curious stares, too many whispered comments. "Mom?" She looked up to find a man standing a respectful distance away. In the fading light, she could make out broad shoulders beneath a worn canvas coat, a face weathered by sun and wind, and eyes that met hers directly without the judgment she'd faced all day. "The livery ain't no place for you and your little one to sleep," he said, his voice deep but gentle. "Night gets bitter cold up here, even in spring." Emma straightened, wariness overriding exhaustion. "We're fine, thank you." The man removed, his hat revealing dark hair streaked with early silver at the temples. "Name's Thomas Miller. I've got a ranch outside town. Small place, but there's a spare room." Before she could respond, he added, "You can lock the door from inside. I sleep in the barn most nights anyway." "Why would you help us?" Emma asked, too tired for pretense. "You don't know me." Thomas looked at Lily, then back to Emma. "Seen enough of this town to know when someone's being treated unfair, that's all." "Mr. Crawford, ain't my employer or my concern," Thomas cut in quietly. "But that child catching mountain fever from a night in the cold would be on my conscience." Emma hesitated, weighing impossible choices. Trust a stranger or risk Lily's health in the night's growing chill. Behind Thomas, she caught sight of Crawford emerging from the Elkhorn saloon, surrounded by companions. She made her decision. "We accept your offer, Mr. Miller. Thank you." Thomas nodded once, then picked up her trunk with ease. "My wagon's just down the street. Can you carry your little one a bit further?" The ride to Thomas Miller's ranch took nearly an hour along winding trails, illuminated only by lantern light and a waxing moon. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Lily slept through it all, wrapped in a wool blanket Thomas had produced from beneath the wagon seat. Emma remained vigilant, studying their surroundings and their benefactor whenever she thought he wasn't watching. Thomas Miller wasn't what she'd expected. Unlike the other men in Pine Ridge with their loud voices and judgmental stares, he moved with a quiet surety. His hands on the reins were steady, calloused from work. He spoke little during their journey, offering only practical information. How far they had to go, a warning before a particularly rough stretch of road. When the wagon finally turned onto a narrower trail, Emma caught her first glimpse of Aspen Creek Ranch. In the moonlight, she could make out the silhouette of a modest cabin, a barn, and what appeared to be a small garden plot. Nothing grand, like what Crawford had promised in his letters, but solid and well-maintained. Thomas halted the wagon before the cabin. "It ain't much," he said, as if reading her thoughts, "but it's dry and warm." Inside, a single oil lamp illuminated a space that spoke of simplicity rather than poverty. The main room held a table, 2 chairs, a small cook stove, and shelves lined with provisions. A door led to what must be the spare room he'd mentioned. "You and your daughter can take that room," Thomas said, setting her trunk down. "There's clean bedding in the chest. I'll get a fire going in here before I head to the barn." Emma stood. Just inside the doorway, Lily still in her arms. "Mr. Miller, why are you really doing this?" Thomas paused in the act of lighting kindling in the small stove. "Does there need to be more than seeing someone in need?" "In my experience, yes." Emma's exhaustion made her bolder than she might otherwise have been. "Men don't offer shelter to strange women without expecting something in return." He straightened, regarding her steadily. "I ain't most men, Mrs. Wilson, and I've seen enough of the world to know sometimes folks deserve better than what they get." He gestured toward Lily. "Your little one looks worn out. Get some rest. We can talk more in the morning." With that, he stepped outside, leaving Emma alone in the warm cabin. She carried Lily into the small bedroom, laying her gently on the narrow bed, before opening the chest, as Thomas had indicated. Inside were neatly folded quilts that smelled of cedar and sunshine. She covered Lily, then sank onto the edge of the bed, the day's events crashing over her like a wave. For the first time since the stagecoach had arrived in Pine Ridge, Emma allowed herself to cry. Silent tears that wouldn't wake her daughter. Everything she'd planned, everything she'd hoped for, had dissolved in an instant. And now she found herself dependent on the kindness of a stranger, in a cabin miles from town, with no clear path forward. She must have fallen asleep sitting there, because the next thing she knew, morning light was streaming through the small window, and the smell of coffee and something cooking wafted from the main room. Emma straightened, disoriented for a moment. Before remembering where they were, Lily still slept soundly beside her. After washing her face in the basin provided and tidying her appearance as best she could, Emma stepped into the main room. Thomas stood at the cook stove, his back to her as he turned bacon in a cast-iron skillet. "I can do that," she said, feeling awkward in the unfamiliar domestic setting. "I'm a good cook." Thomas glanced over his shoulder. "Already started. Coffee's ready, though, if you'd like some." Emma accepted the mug he offered, wrapping her fingers around its warmth. "Mr. Miller, I appreciate your kindness, but I need to be practical. We can't impose on you indefinitely." "Ain't an imposition if I offered," he replied, transferring bacon to a plate. "And it's Thomas. Mr. Miller makes me sound like my father." "Thomas, then." She took a breath. "I need to find work, a place for Lily and me. We can't stay here." He turned to face her fully then, and in the morning light, Emma noticed details she'd missed the night before. Thomas Miller was perhaps in his late 30s, with lines etched around his eyes that spoke of both laughter and hardship. A small scar ran along his jawline, barely visible beneath several days' growth of beard. His clothes were worn, but clean, practical for ranch work. "Town ain't going to be kind to you right now," he said bluntly. Crawford's got influence. People listen when he talks. I still need to try. Emma straightened her shoulders. I won't be defeated by one man's rejection. Something like respect flickered in Thomas's eyes. Didn't think you would be, but maybe give it a few days. Let the gossip die down some. And in the meantime? In the meantime, he said, gesturing toward the stove, breakfast is ready, and after that I've got work to do around the place. You and your daughter are welcome to rest, or... He hesitated. Been meaning to get that garden plot ready for planting. Spring comes late up here, but it's time. Emma recognized the offer for what it was, a chance to contribute, to maintain her dignity. I'm familiar with gardening. My father had a vegetable garden back home in Missouri. Thomas nodded, saying nothing more as he set the food on the table. A moment later, Lily appeared in the bedroom doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes, her dark curls a tangled halo around her face. She regarded Thomas with solemn curiosity. Are you our new papa? She asked with a child's directness. Emma nearly choked on her coffee. Lily! No! This is Mr. Miller. He's helping us for a little while. Thomas, to his credit, didn't seem fazed by the question. He knelt to Lily's eye level. I'm Thomas, and you must be Lily. Are you hungry? Got some bacon here, and I think I might have a bit of honey for bread if you'd like. The child nodded eagerly, previous question forgotten in the face of promised honey. As Thomas prepared a plate for Lily, Emma observed the ease with which he interacted with her daughter, not awkward or distant as some men were with children, but not overly familiar either. After breakfast, true to his word, Thomas showed Emma the garden plot, a modest rectangle of earth near the cabin, already partially turned over. He provided tools and basic instructions before heading to the barn to tend to his horses and the small herd of cattle she'd glimpsed in a nearby pasture. Emma worked steadily through the morning, finding unexpected solace in the physical labor. Lily played nearby, constructing elaborate stories with pine cones and sticks. The mountain air was clean and sharp, the sun warm on her back. For brief moments, she almost forgot the humiliation of the previous day, the uncertainty that still stretched before them. By mid-afternoon, she'd made considerable progress on the garden, turning over rich, dark soil that promised good growing. She straightened, pressing a hand against her aching back, and found Thomas observing her from a few yards away. You're no stranger to hard work, he remarked. Not a question, but an acknowledgement. Emma wiped perspiration from her brow. Life doesn't allow for idle hands, especially after my husband died. Thomas nodded, understanding in his expression. What happened to him, if you don't mind my asking? Influenza, Emma replied. The familiar grief a dull ache now rather than the sharp pain it once had been. 2 winters ago, James was a carpenter, good with his hands, always building something. She looked toward Lily, who was now carefully arranging pebbles in patterns. He never even got to hear her speak in full sentences. Thomas was quiet for a moment, then said, Lost my wife 5 years back, childbirth, baby too. The simple statement, delivered without self-pity, explained much about this solitary man and his willingness to help a mother and child. Emma met his gaze, recognizing a fellow traveler on the path of grief. I'm sorry, she said simply. He nodded once, acknowledgement of shared understanding. Got stew simmering for supper, should be ready in an hour or so. With that, he returned to his work, leaving Emma to hers. That evening, after Lily had been tucked into bed, Emma joined Thomas at the table. He offered her a mug of tea, which she accepted gratefully. I need to be honest with you, she said, after a few minutes of companionable silence. I have very little money left. I spent nearly everything getting to Pine Ridge. Thomas regarded her steadily. Wasn't asking for payment. I know, but Emma hesitated. I need to understand what this is. Why you're helping us." He looked down at his calloused hands, then back at her. 5 years ago, when Sarah, my wife, died, I was in a dark place. Neighbors helped some, but I pushed most folks away. Then one night got caught in a blizzard coming back from town. Would have frozen if a family of settlers hadn't found me, taken me in, never even got their names proper. They moved on Westcombe, spring. He paused, seemingly searching for words. Guess I learned sometimes you help because you can. Nothing more complicated than that. Emma studied him, looking for deception but finding only sincerity. "And how long can we stay?" "As long as you need," Thomas replied. "Ain't going to put you and your girl out with nowhere to go." The simplicity of his answer, the lack of conditions, brought unexpected tears to Emma's eyes. She blinked them away hastily. "Thank you. We won't impose longer than necessary." Thomas nodded, then changed the subject. "Thinking of planting potatoes in that garden, maybe some beans, carrots. What would you suggest?" They spent the next hour discussing practical matters, gardening, the approaching spring, the work needed around the ranch. Emma found herself relaxing incrementally, Thomas's straightforward manner a balm after months of uncertainty and fear. That night, lying beside Lily in the narrow bed, Emma reflected on the strange turns her life had taken. From respectable, a carpenter's wife to widow, from desperate mail-order bride to rejected outsider, and now, what? Guest? Charity case? The uncertainty of their position gnawed at her, but beneath it lay something unexpected, a tentative sense of safety she hadn't felt since before James fell ill. Days passed, establishing a routine of sorts. Emma took over the cooking and household tasks, insisting it was only fair exchange for their lodging. Thomas didn't argue, seeming to appreciate returning to hot meals after long days of ranch work. Lily blossomed in the open space, her natural curiosity finding endless outlets in the new environment. On their 5th day at Aspen Creek Ranch, Emma was hanging laundry to dry in the spring sunshine when she heard approaching hoofbeats. Shading her eyes, she made out 2 riders coming up the trail, one she didn't recognize, and beside him, unmistakably, William Crawford. Fear surged through her as she called for Lily, who had been playing near the garden. The child ran to her side, sensing her mother's tension. Thomas emerged from the barn, alerted by the approaching visitors. Crawford reined his horse to a stop, looking down at Emma with cold eyes before shifting his gaze to Thomas. "Should have known you'd be involved in this, Miller." Thomas walked forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Emma and Lily. "Something I can help you with, Crawford. Just making sure the good people of Pine Ridge know what kind of woman you're harboring out here." Crawford's voice dripped with false concern. "A deceiver. A woman who hides the truth when it suits her." Emma stepped forward. "I made a mistake in not being forthright about my daughter, but that doesn't give you the right to slander me across town." Crawford's companion, a thin man with a sour expression, spoke up. "It's hardly slander when it's God's truth. A proper woman wouldn't be living unchaperoned with a man she barely knows." Thomas's expression remained impassive. "Mrs. Wilson and her daughter are my guests. Nothing improper about offering shelter to those in need." "Always the savior, aren't you, Miller?" Crawford sneered. "First taking in that half-breed boy years back, now a fallen woman and her—" "That's enough." Thomas's voice cut like steel. "You've said your piece. Now get off my property." Crawford's face darkened. "Just thought you should know. I've spoken with Sheriff Daniels. He's concerned about the child's welfare, living out here with unconventional arrangements. Might be his duty to look into it." Emma's blood ran cold. "You wouldn't dare." "Not my decision," Crawford replied with false regret. "Law's the law." He tipped his hat mockingly. "Good day, Mrs. Wilson. Miller." With that, he turned his horse and rode away. his companion following. When they were out of earshot, Emma turned to Thomas, panic rising. "Can he do that? Take Lily away?" Thomas's jaw was tight, but his voice remained calm for Lily's benefit. "No, Sheriff Daniels is a reasonable man. Crawford's just trying to scare you." "But what if—" "We'll go into town tomorrow," Thomas said firmly. "Clear things up with the sheriff. Crawford doesn't speak for everyone in Pine Ridge." Emma nodded, trying to believe him. That night, she barely slept, holding Lily close, as if someone might snatch her away. By morning, her resolve had hardened. They would face this threat head-on. The journey to town was tense, Thomas driving the wagon with Emma and Lily beside him on the seat. Emma had dressed them both in their best clothes, not fine, but clean and respectable. She'd secured her hair neatly beneath her bonnet, determined to present an image of propriety. Pine Ridge looked different in daylight than it had on her. A rival, smaller somehow, less intimidating, despite the memories of rejection. Thomas tied the wagon outside the sheriff's office, helping Emma and Lily down. "Let me do the talking at first," he said quietly. "Daniels and I go back some years." Inside, Sheriff Robert Daniels looked up from his desk, surprise registering on his weathered face. "Thomas, wasn't expecting to see you in town." His gaze shifted to Emma and Lily. "Ma'am." "Bob," Thomas greeted him, "heard there might be some concerns about Mrs. Wilson and her daughter staying at my place. Thought we'd clear things up directly." Daniels leaned back in his chair, assessing them. Crawford did come by, making noise. But you know how he is. Always got to be the most important voice in the room. "Then there's no official concern?" Emma asked, hope rising. The sheriff studied her. "No law against a widow and her child accepting shelter, ma'am. The folks will talk. They always do. I'm not concerned with gossip," Emma said firmly. "Only with keeping my daughter safe and finding our place here." Something like approval flickered in Daniel's eyes. "Fair enough." He looked at Thomas. "You always did have a knack for finding strays, Miller." Thomas's expression remained neutral. "Mrs. Wilson isn't a stray. She's a neighbor who needed help." The sheriff nodded slowly. "Crawford seems to think differently. Been telling anyone who'll listen about being deceived by a mail-order bride." "I made a mistake," Emma said, lifting her chin. "One I've acknowledged. But that doesn't give him the right to turn an entire town against us or threaten my custody of Lily." Daniels sighed. "No, it doesn't. And for what it's worth, not everyone's listening to him. Dr. Green asked after you just yesterday, wondered if you and your daughter were being looked after." A small comfort, but Emma clung to it. "Thank you, Sheriff." As they turned to leave, Daniels called after them. "Thomas, word of advice. If Mrs. Wilson's going to stay at your place much longer, might want to consider making arrangements that won't give Crawford ammunition. Man like that can make life difficult, even out at Aspen Creek." Thomas nodded once, understanding the warning. Outside, Emma took a deep breath of mountain air. What did he mean by arrangements? Thomas looked uncomfortable for the first time since she'd met him. He meant people will talk about an unmarried woman living at a bachelor's ranch. Could cause problems, especially with Crawford stirring things up. Oh. Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I see." "We should get supplies while we're here," Thomas said, clearly wanting to change the subject. "Need flour, coffee, few other things." They walked toward the general store, not Crawford's, but a smaller establishment at the far end of town. Along the way, Emma was acutely aware of the stares, the whispers that followed them. She kept her head high, Lily's hand firmly in hers. Inside the store, the proprietor, an older woman with sharp eyes, greeted Thomas by name, but regarded Emma with open curiosity. As Thomas gathered supplies, Emma found herself browsing fabric, admiring a bolt of sturdy cotton in a soft blue. "That would suit you," came a gentle voice beside her. Emma turned to find a woman, perhaps a few years older than herself, dressed in a simple but well-made dress, a doctor's bag in her hand. "I'm Martha Johnson," the woman continued. "Dr. Green's assistant. You must be Mrs. Wilson." Emma nodded cautiously. "Word travels fast in Pine Ridge." Martha smiled ruefully. "It does, though not always accurately." She lowered her voice. "Not everyone believes what Mr. Crawford has been saying. Some of us form our own opinions." Before Emma could respond, the bell above the door jingled, and William Crawford himself entered. The store fell silent as his gaze landed on Emma, then shifted to Thomas, who had moved protectively closer to Lily. "Twice in one day," Crawford remarked coldly. "Pine Ridge is certainly being treated to quite the spectacle." Thomas set down the sack of flour he'd been examining. "We're just getting supplies, Crawford. No need to make it more than it is." "On the contrary," Crawford replied, his voice carrying through the small store. "I think the good people of Pine Ridge deserve to know exactly what kind of woman is in their midst. One who lies about her circumstances, who brings a fatherless child." "My daughter had a father," Emma interrupted, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "A good man who died of influenza. James Wilson was a carpenter, a churchgoer, and my lawfully wedded husband." Crawford's eyes narrowed. "So you claim—" "I have our marriage certificate in my trunk," Emma replied, "and his death notice from the Kansas City Gazette. Would you like to see them, Mr. Crawford? Would that satisfy your concern for the town's moral welfare?" A murmur ran through the small crowd that had gathered. Crawford's face darkened with anger or embarrassment, perhaps both. "Your deception was in not revealing the child in your letters," he retorted. "A mistake I've acknowledged," Emma said. "One made out of fear that you would reject us before even meeting us, a fear that proved entirely justified." Martha Johnson stepped forward. "Really, William, haven't you caused enough distress? The poor woman traveled all this way based on your invitation." Crawford turned his glare on her. "This isn't your concern, Mrs. Johnson." "Perhaps not," came another voice, and Dr. Samuel Green emerged from the back of the store. "But the health and welfare of a mother and child are very much my concern as this town's physician. And I must say, the stress you're causing cannot be beneficial to either." Crawford looked around, clearly sensing the shift in the room. What had started as a chance to further humiliate Emma was turning against him. With a final cold glare, he turned and left the store without purchasing anything. In the silence that followed, Emma found herself surrounded by curious but not unfriendly faces. Thomas placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "We should finish up here," he said quietly. "Been a long day already." As they completed their purchases, Martha Johnson approached again. "Mrs. Wilson, I host a sewing circle every Wednesday afternoon. You and your daughter would be welcome to join us." Emma blinked in surprise. "Thank you, that's very kind." Outside, loading supplies into the wagon, Emma felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and triumph. "That wasn't what I expected," she admitted. Thomas secured the last sack in the wagon bed. "Crawford miscalculated. Thought everyone would just take his word on things. But why does he care so much? Why continue pursuing this vendetta?" Thomas helped her and Lily up to the wagon seat. "Men like Crawford hate being wrong, hate being defied, even more." He climbed up beside them. "And I expect he's not pleased about you finding shelter with me in particular." "Why would that matter?" Thomas flicked the reins, setting the horses in motion. "Old history, nothing worth getting into." But Emma sensed there was more to the story. Something in the way Crawford had sneered about Thomas taking in that half-breed boy years back. She didn't press, though. Thomas had respected her privacy. She would respect his. As they left, Pine Ridge behind, Emma felt something shift inside her, a small seed of hope taking root. For the first time since stepping off that stagecoach, she could imagine a future here, if not the one she'd originally planned. The setting sun cast long shadows across the trail as they approached Aspen Creek Ranch. Thomas was uncharacteristically quiet, seeming lost in thought. When they reached the cabin, he helped unload the supplies, but remained on the porch as Emma took Lily inside. After getting her daughter settled with a simple dinner, Emma stepped back outside to find Thomas still there, staring out at the mountains turning purple in the fading light. "Thank you," she said softly, "for standing with us today." He turned to face her. "Wasn't just me. Seems you've got more allies in town than Crawford expected." Still, Emma wrapped her shawl tighter against the evening chill. "You didn't have to involve yourself in our troubles." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. "Sheriff's right about one thing. People will keep talking as long as you're staying here. Could make things harder for you and Lily." Emma's heart sank. "Are you asking us to leave?" "No." His response was immediate, definitive. "That's not what I'm saying at all." He removed his hat, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of rare uncertainty. "What I'm trying to say, poorly, is that there might be a way to silence the gossip, to give you and Lily a permanent place here, if that's what you want." Emma's breath caught as understanding dawned. "Mr. Miller." "Thomas," he corrected gently. "Thomas, are you suggesting—" He met her gaze directly. "A marriage of convenience would give Lily a legal protector, give you security, would stop Crawford and his kind from causing trouble. That's a significant proposal for someone you've known less than a week," Emma said carefully. Thomas nodded. "It is, and I'm not asking for an answer now, just asking you to consider it." He put his hat back on, preparing to head to the barn, where he still insisted on sleeping, despite Emma's protests that he should take his own bed back. "I'm not looking for anything beyond companionship and maybe help with the ranch. Separate rooms if you want, but it would be legal, proper." "And Lily?" His expression softened. "She's part of the arrangement. A bonus, not a burden." Emma stood speechless, overwhelmed by the unexpected offer. Thomas seemed to understand her need for space. "Take your time," he said. "Think on it. No pressure either way." With that, he headed toward the barn, leaving Emma alone with her racing thoughts and the vast, star-filled sky above. The mountain night wrapped around Emma as she stood on the porch long after Thomas had disappeared into the barn. His unexpected proposal echoed in her mind, stirring a complex mix of emotions she couldn't immediately untangle. Marriage. The word itself carried weight, memories, promises. She had loved James deeply, their union born of genuine affection rather than pragmatic necessity. This would be different, a partnership rooted in mutual benefit rather than romantic love. She went inside, checking on Lily, who slept peacefully, one small hand curled near her face. In the soft lamplight, Emma could see James in their daughter's features, the shape of her eyes, the determined set of her chin. What would he think of Thomas Miller's offer? The question ached somewhere beneath her ribs. Emma moved to the small window, gazing out at the barn where a faint light still glowed. Thomas Miller was a good man, that much she'd discerned in their short acquaintance, patient with Lily, respectful of Emma's boundaries, willing to stand against Crawford's cruelty. But marriage was a lifetime commitment, not to be entered lightly, regardless of the circumstances. Sleep eluded her that night. Emma rose before dawn, moving quietly through her morning routine. By the time Thomas entered the cabin, she had breakfast prepared and Lily dressed for the day. "Morning," he said, removing his hat. His manner betrayed. No sign of discomfort, no pressure for an answer to last night's proposition. "Good morning," Emma replied, setting a plate before him. "There's fresh coffee." They ate in companionable silence, interrupted only by Lily's cheerful chatter about a family of rabbits she'd spotted near the garden. After breakfast, Thomas mentioned heading to the north pasture to check on a pregnant heifer, and Emma found herself volunteering to accompany him, Lily bouncing with excitement at the prospect. The walk gave Emma time to observe Thomas in his element. He moved with purpose across the land, pointing out features to Lily: a hawk's nest high in a pine, deer tracks crossing their path, the first columbine blooms tucked among rocks. His knowledge was intimate, the respect he showed for the land evident in every gesture. At the pasture, they found the heifer resting in the shade of an aspen grove. Thomas checked her condition with gentle, practiced hands. "She'll calve within the week," he said, straightening. "First timer, but she looks healthy." Lily approached cautiously, eyes wide. "Can I touch her?" Thomas nodded, showing her how to offer her hand for the animal to sniff before placing it on the cow's broad side. Lily's face lit with wonder as she felt the movement beneath her palm. "The baby's kicking," she exclaimed, "like when I used to kick inside Mama." Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks, but Thomas merely smiled. "That's right. New life getting, ready to meet the world." Later, as they walked back toward the cabin, Lily ran ahead, chasing butterflies through the tall grass. Emma took advantage of the moment of privacy. "I've been thinking about your proposal," she said quietly. Thomas glanced at her, his expression attentive but neutral. "No rush to decide." "I know," Emma gathered her thoughts, "but I need to understand exactly what you're offering, and why. A week ago, we were strangers." He was silent for several paces, clearly considering his words. "I meant what I said. It would be a marriage of convenience. Nothing more expected than companionship. You'd have security, a legitimate place here. Lily would have a stable home." He paused. "As for why, I've been alone a long time. Ranch needs a woman's touch. And I've grown fond of you both." "Fondness seems an insufficient foundation for marriage," Emma observed. Thomas stopped walking, turning to face her. "My first marriage started with love. All the poetry and passion young folks dream about. Sarah and I had 3 good years before." He cleared his throat. "What I'm saying is, I know the difference. I'm not offering romance, Mrs. Wilson. I'm offering partnership, respect, a share in what I've built here. That may not be enough for you, and I'd understand." Emma studied his weathered face, the sincerity in his gray eyes. "And what of marital obligations?" A faint color touched Thomas's cheekbones. "That would be your decision entirely. I won't pretend I'm made of stone, but I'm not a boy ruled by urges either. I'd never press for what wasn't freely given." His directness was oddly reassuring. No false promises, no manipulation, just honest terms offered with dignity. "You should know," Emma said, "that I don't plan to have more children. Lily's birth was difficult. The doctor advised against it." Thomas nodded, absorbing this information without visible reaction. "That doesn't change my offer." A call from Lily, who had discovered a porcupine waddling through the underbrush, interrupted their conversation. The moment passed, but Emma carried Thomas's words with her throughout the day, weighing them against her limited options. By evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun sink behind the mountains, Lily already asleep inside, Emma had reached her decision. "Yes," she said simply. Thomas turned to her, brows raised in question. "Yes," Emma repeated. "I accept your proposal, a marriage of convenience, as you described it." His expression remained steady, though something shifted in his eyes. "You're certain?" Emma nodded. "I'm practical enough to recognize a sound arrangement. You offer Lily stability and protection. You offer me respect and partnership. Those are rare commodities for a woman in my position." She took a breath. "But I have conditions. Name them." "First, we maintain separate sleeping arrangements, at least initially. Second, I want some independence, to visit town, perhaps find opportunities to contribute beyond household duties. Third, she hesitated. If either of us becomes unhappy with the arrangement, we discuss it honestly. Thomas considered her terms, then extended his hand as if sealing a business contract. Agreed. Emma placed her hand in his, noting the strength in his calloused palm, the careful way he shook her hand without gripping too firmly, a strange way to cement a marriage proposal, yet somehow fitting for what they were undertaking. When? She asked. Can ride into town tomorrow. Speak with the preacher, unless you'd prefer to wait. Emma shook her head. No advantage in delay. Sooner we establish a legitimate household, sooner the gossip will die down. Thomas nodded, standing to return to the barn for the night. At the steps, he paused. For what it's worth, I'll do my best to be a good husband and a good father to Lily. The simple promise, spoken without flourish, touched Emma more deeply than elaborate declarations might have. I know you will, she replied softly. The next morning, they made the journey to Pine Ridge, Lily between them on the wagon seat. Unaware of the significance of their errand, Emma had dressed in her best dress, the blue one she'd worn when first arriving by stagecoach, now carefully washed and pressed. Thomas wore a clean shirt and had trimmed his beard, small gestures that acknowledged the importance of the day. Their first stop was the small white church at the edge of town. The minister, Reverend Peterson, listened to their request with minimal surprise. Such arrangements weren't uncommon in frontier communities where practical considerations often outweighed romantic notions. I can perform the ceremony tomorrow afternoon, he offered. Will you be having witnesses? Emma hesitated, realizing she knew almost no one in Pine Ridge beyond Martha Johnson's brief kindness. Sheriff Daniels and Dr. Green, Thomas answered. If they're willing. Very good. The Reverend made a note. 3 o'clock then? Outside the church, Emma felt a curious lightness, as if a decision had been made that had actually been inevitable from the first moment Thomas had offered her shelter. They were walking toward the general store to purchase supplies when a familiar voice called out, Mrs. Wilson. Martha Johnson approached, her face warm with genuine welcome. I'm so pleased to see you again, and this must be Lily. She smiled. At the child, who regarded her curiously. She has your eyes. Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. Martha, please. She glanced at Thomas, acknowledging him with a polite nod. Mr. Miller. Ma'am. Thomas shifted awkwardly. If you'll excuse me, I need to speak with the sheriff. I'll meet you ladies at the store in a while. As Thomas departed, Martha linked her arm through Emma's. Come, walk with me. The store can wait a few minutes. When they were beyond earshot of others, she continued, I hope you don't mind my forwardness, but I wanted to assure you that not everyone in Pine Ridge shares William Crawford's views. Some of us were quite appalled by his behavior. Emma felt a rush of gratitude for the unexpected alliance. Thank you. That means more than you know. Is it true you're staying at Mr. Miller's ranch? Martha asked, then immediately held up a hand. Forgive me, that's terribly nosy. You don't have to answer. It's all right, Emma assured her. Yes, Mr. Miller offered us shelter when no one else would. He's been a perfect gentleman. Martha smiled knowingly. Thomas Miller has always been an honorable man. Despite what some may whisper, he keeps to himself, but his reputation for fairness is well earned. She hesitated, though Crawford has never forgiven him for what happened with the Blackfoot boy. The half-breed boy Crawford mentioned? Emma couldn't contain her curiosity. Thomas hasn't spoken of it. Martha looked around to ensure they weren't overheard. It was before my time, but my husband told me the story. About 6 years ago, a half-Blackfoot boy was caught stealing food from Crawford's store. Crawford wanted him publicly whipped as an example. Thomas stepped in, paid for the damaged goods, and took the boy in, taught him ranching, helped him get on his feet. What happened to him? Emma asked. Grew up strong from what I hear, moved north to Montana Territory a couple of years back. Still writes to Thomas occasionally. Martha squeezed Emma's arm. Crawford never forgave the interference. He holds grudges like other men hold gold. The information filled in pieces of the puzzle that was Thomas Miller, a man who stood against cruelty, who helped those society rejected. It reinforced Emma's confidence in her decision. Actually, Emma said, lowering her voice, Mr. Miller and I are to be married tomorrow afternoon. Martha's eyes widened momentarily, before crinkling with pleasure. Well, that's wonderful news. It's a practical arrangement, Emma clarified quickly, for propriety's sake and for Lily's security. Martha's expression remained warm, without judgment. Many frontier marriages begin practically, Mrs. Wilson. That doesn't mean they can't grow into something more, given time and care. She patted Emma's hand. I would be honored to help you prepare, if you'd allow it. Perhaps a small bouquet from my garden. And I believe I have a length of white ribbon that would complement your lovely hair. Emma found herself blinking, back unexpected tears at the kindness. That would be most appreciated, thank you. Later, reunited with Thomas, Emma shared Martha's offer. She's been very kind, she concluded. Thomas nodded. Good people in Pine Ridge. Once you get past the surface, sheriffs agreed to stand as witness. So has Dr. Green. He hesitated. If you've had second thoughts, now would be the time to say, so? I haven't, Emma assured him, surprised to realize it was entirely true. Have you? A rare smile softened his features. No, ma'am, not a one. That night, back at the ranch, Emma tucked Lily into bed and explained as simply as she could what was to happen the next day. Thomas has asked us to stay here permanently, she said. He and I are going to be married tomorrow, which means he'll be your new father. Lily considered this solemnly. Will I call him Papa? Emma smoothed a curl from her daughter's forehead. That would be up to Thomas. We can ask him what he'd prefer. I like him, Lily declared with a child's simple honesty. He doesn't shout and he knows about animals. Emma smiled. Yes, he does. Will we be a family, like before Papa James went to heaven? The question tugged at Emma's heart. A different kind of family, sweetheart, but a family nonetheless. After Lily fell asleep, Emma stepped outside. Thomas sat on the porch steps, whittling what appeared to be a small wooden horse. For Lily, he explained, holding it up. Thought she might like it. Emma sat beside him, careful to maintain a proper distance. She was asking what she should call you after tomorrow. Thomas's hands stilled. What do you think is right? She remembers James as Papa, perhaps father for you, unless you'd prefer something else. He considered this, turning the small carving over in his hands. Father sounds proper enough, though she can use whatever name feels comfortable. No rush to decide. Emma nodded, appreciating his patience. Lily also asked if we'd be a family, like before. Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Hope that didn't trouble you. Can't replace what she had before. No, Emma agreed softly, but perhaps we can build something new, different, but solid in its own way. They sat in companionable silence after that, the spring night wrapping around them, full of possibility and the quiet promise of tomorrow. The wedding itself was a simple affair. Emma wore her blue dress with Martha's white ribbon in her hair and carried a small bouquet of early mountain wildflowers. Thomas had donned a clean shirt and his least-worn trousers, his hair neatly combed. Lily, beaming with importance, held a single columbine blossom Martha had given her. Reverend Peterson performed the ceremony with straightforward dignity in the small church. Sheriff Daniels and Dr. Green stood as witnesses, their presence lending legitimacy to the union. Martha Johnson sat in the front pew, occasionally dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. When Thomas placed a simple gold band on Emma's finger, his late wife's, he had explained earlier, the metal felt cool and strange against her skin. The Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, and Thomas bent to place a chaste kiss on her cheek. The gesture, though clearly for show, sent an unexpected warmth through Emma. After the ceremony, Dr. Green insisted on hosting a small reception at his home. The modest gathering included a few townspeople Martha had evidently informed, all of whom offered genuine congratulations. Emma noted that while William Crawford's name was never mentioned, his absence loomed in occasional glances and lowered voices. "He won't be pleased," Sheriff Daniels murmured to Thomas as they prepared to depart. Thomas's expression hardened slightly. "Crawford's pleasure isn't my concern. Just be watchful," the sheriff advised. "Man like that doesn't take defeat easily." The warning cast a brief shadow over the day, but as they drove back to Aspen Creek Ranch, now officially home to all three of them, Emma found herself filled with cautious optimism. Whatever Crawford might think or do, they had established themselves as a legitimate family in the eyes of the law and the community. At the ranch, Thomas surprised her by gathering Lily in one arm and offering his other hand to help Emma down from the wagon. "Traditional for a groom to carry his bride across the threshold," he said with uncharacteristic lightness. "But I thought perhaps we should all enter together, start as we mean to go on." The gesture touched Emma deeply. Together, the three of them climbed the porch steps and entered the cabin that was now their shared home. That evening, after a simple celebration meal, Emma put Lily to bed. The child fell asleep, clutching the wooden horse Thomas had finished carving that morning. In the main room, an awkward moment finally arrived as Emma realized they had never explicitly discussed sleeping arrangements for their first night as husband and wife. Thomas seemed to read her thoughts. "I've prepared the small room off the back porch," he said. "Used to store tools there, but cleared it out last night. Put my bed in there. You and Lily keep the bedroom." Relief and something less easily named flowed through Emma. "Thank you for honoring our agreement," he nodded. "Meant what I said. Nothing expected that isn't freely given." He hesitated. "Though there is one thing I'd like to discuss." "Yes?" "The ranch," Thomas said, gesturing around them. "As my wife, you should know its workings, its value. If anything happened to me, it would be yours and Lily's." Emma hadn't considered this aspect of their arrangement. That's very generous. Not generosity, practicality. He retrieved a wooden box from a shelf and placed it on the table between them. "Deeds in here. Bank documents too. Not wealthy, but the land's paid for. Herds, small but good stock. Enough to provide if managed properly." As he showed her the papers, explaining aspects of the ranch's operation, Emma was struck by the trust this represented. Thomas was giving her not just his name, but potentially his livelihood, his life's work. "I'll learn," she promised. "I want to contribute more than just keeping house." Thomas nodded, understanding her need for purpose beyond domestic duties. "Thought you might feel that way. Could teach you cattle work if you're interested. And there's the garden you've started. Could expand that, maybe sell vegetables in town come harvest time." The conversation continued well into the evening, a discussion between partners rather than man and wife in the traditional sense. When they finally bid each other good night, Emma, retreating to the bedroom she shared with Lily, and Thomas to his newly arranged quarters, she felt more settled than she had since James's death. Marriage to Thomas Miller might lack romance, but it offered something equally valuable: respect, security, and the chance to build a life on her own terms. The following weeks brought a gradual adjustment to their new family structure. Thomas proved true to his word, treating Emma with consistent respect while maintaining the boundaries they'd established. With Lily, he showed remarkable patience, answering her endless questions about ranch life and teaching her about the animals with gentle guidance. Emma found herself settling into a rhythm, her days filled with purpose. Beyond the domestic tasks she'd always managed, Thomas began teaching her aspects of ranch operation, how to judge a calf's health, the proper way to mend fences, when to move the small herd between pastures. She absorbed these lessons eagerly, finding satisfaction in work that connected her to the land in ways city life never had. 3 weeks after their wedding, Martha Johnson's sewing circle provided Emma's first real social connection to Pine Ridge beyond Thomas. The gathering of women welcomed her with varying degrees of warmth, some clearly curious about her unusual path to marriage, others simply glad for fresh company. "We meet every Wednesday," Martha explained as she introduced Emma around, ostensibly for sewing, but truly for conversation and companionship. Emma, who had brought along mending from the ranch, settled into the circle. Lily played contentedly with Martha's young niece in the corner of the parlor, the two girls becoming fast friends. "How are you finding married life, Mrs. Miller?" asked one woman Emma recognized from the general store. The name still sounded strange to her ears. "Very well, thank you. Thomas is a good man." "Such a whirlwind courtship," observed another woman, her tone not unkind but clearly curious. "Sometimes those prove the strongest unions." Emma chose her words carefully. "We recognized in each other qualities that promised compatibility. Sometimes that's apparent quickly." Martha changed the subject smoothly, sparing Emma further interrogation, but the exchange highlighted the unusual nature of her situation. To these women, raised with certain expectations about marriage, Emma and Thomas's arrangement would seem incomprehensible. Better to let them believe in a hasty romance than explain the practical reality. As the gathering concluded, Martha walked with Emma to where Thomas waited with the wagon. "You handled that beautifully," she murmured. "The curiosity will fade with time." "Thank you for including us," Emma replied. "It meant more than you know." Martha smiled warmly. "You're one of us now, Emma. Remember that." The simple assertion of belonging, of community, carried Emma through the ride home, a gentle happiness settling in her chest. Perhaps Pine Ridge could truly become home given time. Thomas noticed her mood. "Good afternoon, then." "Very good," Emma confirmed. Lily made a friend in Martha's niece, and the women were welcoming for the most part. "Glad to hear it." He hesitated, then added, "Thought we might ride into town together next week. Need supplies, and there's the spring social at the church. Might be good to attend as a family." Emma glanced at him in surprise. Thomas had never struck her as the type to seek social gatherings. "I'd like that," she said. "Lily would enjoy it too." He nodded, seemingly relieved by her agreement. "Been thinking we should be seen more in town. Establish ourselves. Make it harder for Crawford to spread talk." So that was it. A strategic move rather than social inclination. Emma understood the practicality, yet felt a flicker of disappointment she couldn't quite explain. "Have you seen him? Crawford?" she asked. Thomas shook his head. "Not since the wedding. Sheriff says he's been quiet. Too quiet, maybe." The reminder of potential trouble lingered between them, tempering Emma's earlier contentment. Whatever life they were building remained under threat, at least while Crawford nursed his wounded pride. That evening, as Emma prepared supper, Thomas spent time with Lily, answering her questions about the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Emma watched through the window as he lifted the child onto his shoulders, pointing out constellations, his deep voice rumbling with explanations of the Dipper and the North Star. The sight stirred something within her, a warmth spreading through her chest. Thomas had no obligation to treat Lily with such kindness, to give her his time and attention. He did so freely, without performance or expectation of gratitude. It spoke to the quality of his character more than any declaration could have. Later, after Lily was asleep, Emma joined Thomas on the porch, as had become their evening ritual. These quiet moments of conversation had gradually become important to Emma, a chance to share the day's events and discuss plans for the ranch. "Lily enjoyed your astronomy lesson," she commented. Thomas smiled slightly. "Smart child, asks good questions. You're good with her." Emma hesitated, then added, "It means a great deal to me, the way you include her. She never knew James. Not really. She was too young when he died to remember him now." Thomas was quiet for a moment. "Lost my father young," he finally said. "Remember how it felt, having someone to look up to matters." The rare personal revelation invited Emma's curiosity. "You rarely speak of your past." He shrugged. "Not much to tell that matters now. Grew up back east, Baltimore. Father was a shipwright, died in an accident when I was 8. Mother remarried. Stepfather and I didn't get along. Left home at 16, worked my way west." He paused. "Made mistakes, learned from them. Found this place 10 years ago, built it up slow." "And Sarah?" Emma asked softly. "Your first wife?" Thomas's face changed subtly, old grief evident in the lines around his eyes. "Met her in Denver. She was teaching school. Married after 6 months, brought her here. She loved it at first. The mountains, the openness. Then the loneliness set in. Women weren't meant to live so isolated." He looked at Emma. "That's why I'm glad about the sewing circle. Need connections beyond just me and Lily." Emma nodded, touched by his consideration. "Sarah's death, was it sudden? Quick, at least?" Thomas stared into the darkness. "Pregnancy seemed normal until it wasn't. Doctor came too late. Lost them both in a matter of hours." His voice remained steady, but his hands, resting on his knees, had tightened into fists. "Blamed myself. For a long time. Too far from town, from help." "You couldn't have known," Emma said gently. "No, but still carried it." He exhaled slowly. "That's why I understood when you said about not wanting more children. Some risks aren't worth taking." The conversation shifted after that, returning to practicalities of ranch life, but something had changed between them. Thomas had shared a piece of himself, his deepest wound, trusting Emma with his grief. It created a new layer of understanding, of connection beyond their practical arrangement. As Emma prepared for bed that night, she found herself reflecting on the strange path that had led her to Aspen Creek Ranch. The devastating rejection by Crawford, which had seemed like the end of all her hopes, had instead opened an unexpected door. Thomas Miller was not the husband she had imagined finding in Pine Ridge, but perhaps he was the partner she truly needed, steady, honorable, kind to her child. Their marriage lacked romantic love, but Emma was beginning to wonder if something equally valuable might grow in its place. A deep friendship, mutual respect, and genuine care. Perhaps that was enough. Perhaps that was everything. The spring. Social at Pine Ridge Church arrived with a perfect blue sky and gentle mountain breeze. Emma spent extra time preparing that morning, pinning her hair more carefully than usual and selecting the dress Martha had helped her alter the previous week. Her old blue dress transformed with new lace collar and cuffs. Lily twirled in her freshly starched pinafore, excitement making her cheeks glow. Thomas appeared in the doorway of the bedroom, clearing his throat softly. Emma turned, surprised to see him in a crisp white shirt and dark vest she hadn't seen before, his hair neatly combed, beard trimmed. "You look," he began, then seemed to reconsider his words. "Very nice, both of you." Emma smoothed her skirt, oddly pleased by his notice. As do you. I didn't realize you owned a vest. Sarah made it, he said, his voice matter-of-fact, rather than mournful. Seemed appropriate for a church social. Oh, the mention of his first wife might have created awkwardness, but somehow it didn't. In their month of marriage, Emma had come to appreciate Thomas's straightforward honesty about his past. It allowed her the same freedom with memories of James. The journey to town was filled with Lily's chatter and questions about the social. What games would they play? Would there be other children? Would there be cake? Thomas answered patiently, though Emma suspected he had limited experience with such events. Pine Ridge looked different today, more welcoming than it had on Emma's first disastrous arrival. Colorful bunting decorated the churchyard, tables laden with food stretched beneath canvas awnings, and nearly the entire population of the town and surrounding homesteads milled about in their Sunday best. Thomas helped Emma down from the wagon, his hand steady and warm around hers. As his fingers lingered just a moment longer than necessary, Emma felt a curious flutter beneath her ribs that she quickly dismissed as nervousness about the social. "Mrs. Miller, Mr. Miller," Martha Johnson called, waving them over, "and Miss Lily, don't you all look wonderful?" The genuine warmth in Martha's greeting eased Emma's tension. She introduced them to her husband, John Johnson, a quiet man with kind eyes who managed the town's small newspaper. "Heard good things about your cattle stock, Miller," Johnson said, shaking Thomas's hand. "Thinking of doing a piece on local ranching. Might stop by sometime if you wouldn't mind." Thomas looked momentarily surprised, but nodded. "Welcome anytime." As the men fell into conversation about cattle prices and spring grazing conditions, Martha linked her arm through Emma's. "Come, several of the ladies have been asking after you, and I believe there are children Lily's age by the swings." With Lily happily integrated into a group of children under the watchful eye of the schoolteacher, Emma found herself surrounded by the women from the sewing circle, this time joined by wives of ranchers from outlying areas who seldom made it to town for weekly gatherings. "Mrs. Miller," one introduced herself as Eleanor Parker, "your husband's ranch borders ours to the west. Thomas has been a good neighbor over the years, helped my Henry during the hard winter of '78 when the snow nearly buried our place." Emma smiled, pleasure warming her at this positive view of Thomas. "He's a good man." "Quiet one, though," another woman commented. "Kept to himself after his tragedy. Good to see him with family again." Conversation flowed easily after that, ranging from practical matters of frontier housekeeping to news of the railroad's advancing construction. Emma found herself relaxing, contributing to discussions about preserving techniques and garden planning. These women faced the same challenges she did: isolation, limited resources, harsh weather, and had developed creative solutions she was eager to learn. Across the churchyard, she occasionally caught glimpses of Thomas. He remained somewhat apart from the more boisterous groups of men, but she noted several approaching him for conversation. Respect was evident in their manner, if not the easy camaraderie some shared. "Your husband isn't one for crowds," Martha observed, following Emma's gaze. "But people value his judgment. That's why Crawford's attempts to turn opinion against. You both never took root." Emma turned to her friend. "Has there been more talk?" Martha sighed. "Crawford has been quiet lately. Too quiet, some think. He's not a man who forgets perceived slights easily." The reminder of that lingering threat dampened Emma's spirits momentarily, but she refused to let it overshadow the day. "We can't live waiting for his next move," she said firmly. "No, you certainly can't." Martha squeezed her arm encouragingly. "Now, let's get you some of Mrs. Green's lemon cake before it disappears. It's famous throughout the county." The afternoon progressed pleasantly. Lily participated in children's games, her laughter carrying across the churchyard. Emma was surprised to see Thomas joining in a horseshoe competition, his usually serious expression softened by concentration. When he landed a ringer, a spontaneous cheer went up from onlookers. Sheriff Daniels appeared at Emma's side as she watched. "Good to see Miller participating," he commented. "Man needs more than just ranch work." "He's not accustomed to socializing," Emma replied. The sheriff's weathered face creased in a knowing smile. "Been different since you and the little one arrived, more present." He nodded toward where Thomas was now showing Lily how to hold a horseshoe. "Suits him. Family life?" Emma felt a peculiar warmth at the observation. "We're still adjusting to our new circumstances." Sheriff Daniels regarded her thoughtfully. "Way I see it, Mrs. Miller, some matches made for convenience end up stronger than those built on passionate feelings that burn out quick." He tipped his hat. Just an old lawman's observation. As the afternoon waned, Thomas found Emma watching Lily play a game with the other children. He held 2 cups of lemonade, offering one to her. "Having a good time?" he asked, his voice betraying uncertainty. Emma nodded, accepting the cool drink gratefully. "Very much so. I think Lily's made several new friends, and the women have been welcoming." "Good." Thomas shifted his weight, seeming uncharacteristically restless. "Thought we might visit the mercantile before heading back. Heard they got new fabric in. Maybe you'd want some, for curtains or such." The suggestion touched Emma. Their cabin was functional, but sparse in decorative touches. Thomas was offering her the chance to make it more of a home. "I'd like that very much." As they walked toward the mercantile, Lily skipping ahead, Emma was acutely aware of Thomas beside her, his solid presence drawing glances from townspeople. They passed. Being seen together publicly as a family felt significant, a statement that their union was real, regardless of its practical foundations. Inside the mercantile, Lily was immediately drawn to a display of colorful hair ribbons. Thomas nodded for Emma to follow her, while he spoke with the proprietor about supplies. Emma was helping Lily choose between blue and yellow ribbons when she heard a familiar voice that sent ice through her veins. "Well, if it isn't Mrs. Miller, or should I say, Mrs. Wilson in convenient disguise." Emma turned slowly to face William Crawford. He stood just inside the entrance, immaculately dressed. As always, his expression a study in false pleasantry. "Mr. Crawford," she acknowledged, keeping her voice steady, "I hope you're well." His eyes moved from her to Lily, then back again. "Playing house with Miller seems to agree with you. Remarkable how quickly arrangements can be made when necessary." Emma placed a protective hand on Lily's shoulder. "My husband and I are very happy, thank you." Crawford's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Husband, such a formal term for what amounts to a business transaction." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Tell me, does he keep you in the back bedroom? Or has he decided damaged goods are better?" "Then none at all." Heat flashed across Emma's face. Anger, not shame. "You will not speak to me that way." "Emma!" Thomas's deep voice came from behind her. He moved to stand beside her, his body angled slightly forward, protective without being possessive. "Everything all right?" Crawford's demeanor shifted, subtly. "Miller, just congratulating your wife on securing such a respectable position. Quite a step up from destitution on arrival." Thomas's jaw tightened, but his voice remained controlled. "My wife deserves your respect, Crawford. I suggest you offer it, or take your business elsewhere." The mercantile had grown quiet, other customers watching the exchange with undisguised interest. Crawford glanced around, clearly noting the public nature of the confrontation. "Of course," he said smoothly. "No disrespect intended, merely making conversation." His gaze hardened as it returned to Thomas. "Though you might want to be careful about the company you keep, Miller. Some, and association, have a way of causing trouble." With that cryptic remark, he turned and exited the store. The silence lingered a moment before conversations gradually resumed. Thomas turned to Emma, concern evident in his eyes. "What did he say to you?" Emma shook her head, conscious of Lily watching them with wide eyes. Nothing worth repeating, especially not here. Thomas nodded, understanding her reluctance to discuss it in public. "Let's finish our shopping and head home." The word home steadied Emma. Whatever Crawford's insinuations, Aspen Creek Ranch was indeed becoming home, a place of safety and growing contentment. They selected fabric for curtains, a blue calico that reminded Emma of summer skies, and Thomas insisted on purchasing the yellow ribbon Lily had admired. As they loaded their purchases into the wagon, Emma noticed Thomas scanning the street with heightened vigilance. The ride home was quieter than their journey into town, Crawford's appearance casting a shadow over the day's earlier pleasures. Lily eventually dozed off, lulled by the wagon's motion and the excitement of the day. "What did he say?" Thomas asked again, his voice low to avoid waking the child. Emma sighed. "He implied our marriage was merely convenient, a business arrangement, and he made vulgar suggestions about its nature." Thomas's hands tightened on the reins. "Man needs a lesson in manners." "He's not worth the trouble," Emma said firmly. "His opinions mean nothing to me." Thomas glanced at her. "Mean nothing to me either, but threats wrapped in insinuation are still threats." "You think he truly means us harm?" The possibility had always existed in abstract, but saying it aloud made it more real. Thomas considered before answering. "Crawford doesn't forget or forgive easily, and he has influence, money, connections. Makes him dangerous in his way." What did he mean about associations causing trouble? Thomas was silent for a long moment. Could have meant several things. My history with the Blackfoot boy Martha told you about. Or could have been referencing something else. "Something else?" Emma prompted when he didn't elaborate. Thomas sighed. "Before settling here, I rode with a man named Harden. Jim Harden, he was. Not always on the right side of the law. I was young, angry after my mother died. Made poor choices." He glanced at her, gauging her reaction. "Never killed anyone, if that's your worry. But I helped move cattle that weren't strictly obtained legally. Served 3 months in a territorial jail for it." Emma absorbed this revelation, surprised less by the information itself than by Thomas's willingness to share it. That was a long time ago. 15 years. But records exist. Crawford has friends in government offices. If he wanted to dig up old trouble, the implication was clear. Crawford could potentially use Thomas's past to damage his standing in the community, perhaps even threaten his freedom or ownership of the ranch. Would it truly matter now, after so much time? Thomas shrugged. Law has a long memory, and folks who might overlook an old mistake could feel different if it was thrown in their faces. Emma fell silent, considering the vulnerability this represented. Their life at Aspen Creek Ranch, the security she'd begun to feel, suddenly seemed more fragile. When they arrived home, Thomas carried the still sleeping Lily to her bed while Emma began unpacking their purchases. The day's brightness had faded, replaced by a heaviness that lingered between them. Later, after a quiet supper, they sat on the porch, as had become their custom. The mountain twilight enveloped them, stars emerging in a deepening blue sky. "I'm sorry," Thomas said suddenly. Emma looked at him in surprise. "For what?" "My past, bringing potential trouble to your door, not the kind of security I promised." "You've nothing to apologize for," Emma said firmly. "We all have histories, Thomas. Decisions we might make differently given another chance." She hesitated, then added, "I wasn't entirely truthful with Crawford in my letters either. I didn't mention Lily. If anyone understands the desire to leave the past behind, it's me." Thomas studied her in the fading light. "You're a remarkable woman, Emma Miller." The use of her married name, combined with the genuine admiration in his voice, sent an unexpected flutter through Emma's chest. "I'm simply practical. It's more than that." Thomas seemed to struggle with his words. "You've brought life back to this place. To me." The admission hung between them, more intimate than any physical touch. Emma felt her breath catch. "I could say the same of you. When Crawford rejected us, I thought all hope was lost. You gave us more than shelter. You gave us dignity." Thomas reached out slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished, and covered her hand with his. The touch was warm, calloused fingers, gentle against her skin. They sat in silence, connected by that simple contact as the stars brightened. Overhead, the following week brought the first real heat of summer, the mountain air warming under cloudless skies. Ranch work intensified with the changing season. The garden needed constant attention, cattle were moved to higher pastures, and preparations began for eventual haying. Emma threw herself into these tasks alongside Thomas, learning quickly and finding unexpected satisfaction in physical work. Her city-bred muscles ached at first, but gradually strengthened. Thomas proved a patient teacher, never dismissive of her questions or efforts. Lily thrived in the open spaces of the ranch, developing a special affection for a gentle mare Thomas kept for riding rather than work. He began teaching the child basic horsemanship, his large hands steadying her tiny ones on the reins, his voice calm as he explained how to communicate with the animal. Emma watched these lessons from the garden, dirt on her knees and hands, a curious warmth spreading through her chest. The sight of Thomas's dark head bent attentively toward Lily's fair one stirred emotions she wasn't entirely ready to examine. Their evenings continued to be spent in conversation on the porch, but something had shifted since the church social. Thomas sat closer now, sometimes reaching for her hand as they talked. These touches were gentle, undemanding, but sent ripples of awareness through Emma's body that both surprised and unsettled her. She had not expected to feel such things again after James. Their marriage arrangement with Thomas had been practical, a partnership of mutual benefit rather than passion. Yet increasingly, she found herself noticing things about him, the strength in his forearms as he worked, the rare smile that transformed his serious face, the gentleness of his large hands with Lily. One evening, after Lily was asleep, Thomas joined Emma on the porch with 2 cups of coffee. The day had been particularly productive. Together, they had repaired fencing in the north pasture, working side by side under the summer sun. "You're getting good with the tools," Thomas commented, handing her a steaming cup. Emma smiled, pleased by the genuine approval in his voice. "I enjoy the work. It's satisfying seeing immediate results of your labor. Not all women would feel that way about ranch chores." "I'm not all women," Emma replied simply. Thomas's gaze met hers, something warm in his gray eyes. "No, you certainly aren't." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken awareness. Emma looked away first, sipping her coffee to hide her sudden confusion. "I've been thinking," Thomas said after a moment, "about Crawford's veiled threat." Emma's pleasant mood dimmed at the mention of the merchant. "Has there been word from town?" "Nothing specific, but I'd be a fool not to prepare." Thomas set his cup down. "I've made some changes to the ranch deed. Had Johnson draw up the papers when I was in town yesterday." "Changes? Put the ranch in both our names," Thomas said matter-of-factly. "If anything happens to me, or if trouble comes because of my past, the property stays with you and Lily." Emma stared at him, stunned by the magnitude of what he'd done. "Thomas, you didn't need to do that." "Wanted to," he replied simply. "You're my wife. Lily's my responsibility now. This ensures you both have security no matter." "What?" The practical arrangement they'd begun with had never included such provisions. Thomas was offering far more than he'd promised, with no expectation of additional benefit to himself. "I don't know what to say," Emma admitted. Thomas shrugged, seemingly uncomfortable with her reaction. Nothing to say, just making things official. But they both knew it was more than that. It was a declaration of commitment deeper than their original agreement, an acknowledgement that whatever had started as convenience had grown into something else. Emma reached for his hand, twining her fingers through his work-roughened ones. "Thank you." They sat in companionable silence as darkness fell. Hands joined, neither pushing for more but both aware that boundaries were slowly shifting between them. The following Sunday brought sweltering heat unusual for the Colorado foothills. After church, where Emma noted Crawford's pointed absence, Thomas suggested they visit the creek that gave the ranch its name. The clear mountain water would offer welcome relief from the oppressive temperature. Lily was ecstatic at the prospect, bouncing with excitement as they packed a simple picnic. The creek was a half-mile walk from the cabin, winding through aspen groves before joining a larger stream that eventually fed the distant river. Emma wore her lightest dress, a pale yellow cotton that had seen better days, but allowed for greater freedom of movement than her heavier garments. Thomas carried the basket in one hand, the other occasionally steadying Lily as she darted ahead on the trail. The creek revealed itself gradually, the sound of rushing water preceding the sight of it glittering between the trees. A small clearing opened beside a deep pool where the water slowed and widened before continuing its journey downhill. "It's beautiful," Emma breathed, taking in the dappled sunlight playing across the water's surface. Thomas nodded, setting down. "The basket. Found this place my first day exploring the property. Knew then I wanted to build here." "Can I put my feet in?" Lily asked, already tugging at her shoes. "Better than that," Thomas replied with rare playfulness. "Thought we might teach you to swim a bit, if your mother approves." Emma smiled at Lily's hopeful expression. "I think that sounds wonderful, but I didn't bring anything suitable for swimming." "Brought an extra shirt of mine," Thomas said, suddenly looking slightly embarrassed. "Thought you might wear it over your underclothes. For modesty. Creek's private enough. No one comes this way." The thoughtfulness of his preparation touched Emma. "That would be perfect. Thank you." Thomas discreetly turned his back, busying himself with unpacking their food, while Emma helped Lily change and then ducked behind a screen of bushes to don the offered shirt over her chemise and drawers. The garment reached nearly to her knees, voluminous enough to preserve propriety while allowing freedom of movement. When she emerged, Thomas had removed his boots and rolled up his trousers to the knee. He looked up as she approached, his eyes widening slightly before he quickly averted his gaze. "Water's cool, but not too cold," he said, voice gruff as he led Lily to the shallower edge of the pool. "We'll stay where it's safe for her." The next hour passed in surprising joy as Thomas patiently taught Lily the basics of floating and paddling in the clear water. Emma joined them, the creek's coolness blissful against her skin after weeks of summer heat. She found herself laughing more freely than she had in years, splashing alongside her daughter, occasionally catching Thomas, watching them with an expression that made her heart beat faster. Eventually, Lily tired and stretched out on a sun-warmed rock to dry, promptly falling asleep as children often do after vigorous activity. Emma and Thomas sat nearby on the creek bank, feet still dangling in the water. "She's a natural swimmer," Thomas commented. "Fearless." Emma smiled fondly at her sleeping daughter. "She's always been that way, rushing headlong into new experiences. Gets that from her mother, I'd guess." Emma turned to him in surprise. "Me? I'm hardly fearless." Thomas's expression grew serious. "Takes courage to travel across the country. alone with a child, to start over among strangers, to accept a marriage proposal from a man you barely knew. Necessity, not courage, Emma demurred. Both, I think. Thomas hesitated, then added softly, I admire you, Emma, more than I can properly express. The sincerity in his voice sent warmth curling through her that had nothing to do with the summer sun. I admire you as well. Your kindness to us, your integrity. Thomas studied her face, something shifting in his eyes. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned closer. Emma's breath caught, her heart pounding against her ribs as his lips met hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning, entirely different from the brief, formal peck at their wedding. His hand came up to cradle her cheek, calloused thumb stroking softly against her skin. Emma found herself responding, leaning into his touch, her own hand lifting to rest against his chest, where she could feel his heartbeat racing to match her own. When they eventually parted, Thomas rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed, as if gathering himself. Been wanting to do that, he admitted quietly. For longer than I should say. Emma's fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt. I'm glad you did. He pulled back slightly to search her face. This isn't part of our arrangement. Don't want you feeling obligated. I don't, Emma assured him. Not at all. Relief and something warmer flooded his expression. Been wondering if it was just me, these feelings developing. It's not just you, Emma admitted, the truth of it washing through her like the clear creek water. Whatever had begun as a practical arrangement had grown organically into genuine affection, perhaps even something deeper. Thomas reached for her hand, twining their fingers together. Don't want to rush you or pressure you. We can take this slow, see where it leads. Emma squeezed his hand gratefully. I'd like that. They remained by the creek until late afternoon, talking more openly than ever before, sharing hopes and small confessions as Lily slept on. When they finally packed up to return to the cabin, something fundamental had shifted between them. They walked close together on the trail, hands occasionally brushing, new awareness humming between them. That night, after Lily was tucked into bed, Thomas lingered by the bedroom door instead of heading to his separate quarters as usual. Thought maybe we could talk a while longer, he suggested. If you're not too tired. Emma's heart quickened. I'd like that. They sat at the kitchen table, a single lamp casting a warm glow over them. Thomas reached across the table for her hand. Want to be clear about something, he began. What happened today, the kiss, it changes things for me. But I need you. To know there's still no expectations. Your room remains your own. We move forward only as you're comfortable. The respect inherent in his words only deepened Emma's growing feelings for him. Thank you for that. And it's been a long time since James, since I felt anything like this. Thomas nodded, understanding. For me too, after Sarah. He paused. Never thought I'd find this again. Wasn't looking for it when you arrived. Nor I, Emma acknowledged. I expected a practical arrangement with Crawford. Security, not feelings. Life has strange ways of giving us what we need rather than what we think we want, Thomas observed quietly. They talked late into the night, neither pushing for definitions or declarations, simply exploring this new territory between them with the same patience and care Thomas showed in all things. When Emma finally retired to her room, she felt a sense of possibility unfurling within her. What had begun as desperate necessity, a mail-order arrangement gone wrong, followed by a marriage of convenience, was blossoming into something genuine and unexpected. She touched her lips, still feeling the gentle pressure of Thomas's kiss, and allowed herself to imagine a future where their practical partnership might grow into a love as real and strong as the mountains surrounding them. The changing seasons brought transformation to more than just the landscape around Aspen Creek Ranch. As summer deepened, the tentative affection between Emma and Thomas blossomed into something neither had anticipated when they'd first entered. Their arrangement, simple touches, his hand at the small of her back as they worked in the garden, her fingers brushing his when passing a tool, became natural, no longer hesitant or surprising. Their evenings on the porch extended later, conversations flowing more freely. Thomas spoke of his dreams for the ranch, expanding the herd, perhaps building a larger house in a few years. Emma shared her own hopes, an education for Lily, perhaps a small business selling preserves and baked goods in town. These exchanges were no longer merely practical discussions between partners, but shared visions between two people building a future together. Lily flourished under their combined care. The child had taken to calling Thomas father with increasing comfort, and he responded with a tenderness that sometimes brought tears to Emma's eyes. She would find them together at the barn, his large hands guiding Lily's small ones, as he taught her to brush the mare, or at the table, heads bent over simple arithmetic lessons he insisted were important for a rancher's daughter to learn. One evening in late July, as they walked back from checking fences in the north pasture, Thomas stopped beneath a towering pine. The setting sun cast golden light through the branches, dappling the ground around them. Without preamble, he turned to Emma and kissed her, deeper, more certain than their first kiss by the creek. When they parted, both slightly breathless, Thomas kept his hands at her waist. "Been thinking," he said, his voice rougher than usual. Emma smiled up at him. A dangerous pastime. His lips quirked in that rare half-smile she'd come to treasure. "Maybe so." He grew serious again. "Been thinking about our arrangement." Emma's heart stuttered. "Oh, do. Started as convenience, practical solution." His thumbs traced small circles against her sides. "But it's more now. For me." "For me too," Emma admitted softly. Thomas's eyes searched hers. "I'm not a man of fancy words, not much for poetry. But I need you to know, what I feel for you isn't practical anymore, it's..." He paused, seeming to gather courage. "I love you, Emma. Not as a convenient wife or Lily's mother. Just you." The simple declaration, spoken in his straightforward way, moved Emma more than elaborate professions might have. "Oh, Thomas," she whispered, reaching up to touch his face. "I love you too." His expression transformed, wonder and joy erasing the habitual seriousness. He pulled her closer, his kiss conveying what words couldn't, the depth of feeling that had grown between them, unexpected and precious. When they returned to the cabin hand in hand, something fundamental had shifted. They prepared supper together, moving around the kitchen in easy harmony, exchanging glances filled with new meaning. After Lily was tucked into bed with a story and Thomas's newly carved wooden rabbit clutched in her arms, they lingered at the table over cups of coffee. "There's something I've been meaning to ask," Emma said, gathering her courage, "about our sleeping arrangements." Thomas looked up, his expression carefully neutral. "What about them?" "They were appropriate when ours was a marriage of convenience." Emma continued, her cheeks warming. But now, understanding dawned in his eyes. "Are you saying you'd like to change them?" Emma nodded, her heart racing. "If you would." Thomas reached across the table for her hand, his fingers warm against hers. "I would, very much. But only if you're certain." "I am," Emma assured him. The arrangement they had started with, separate rooms, a marriage in name only, no longer reflected what had grown between them. She wanted more, a true marriage in every sense. That night, Thomas moved his few possessions into the main bedroom. Their coming together was tender, unhurried, a natural progression of the love that had developed over the months since Emma had first arrived in Pine Ridge. Afterwards, lying in the circle of his arms, Emma marveled at how differently her life had unfolded from what she'd planned, and how much richer it had become through unexpected turns. "Thinking deep thoughts," Thomas murmured, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. Emma smiled against his chest. "Just that sometimes life's greatest blessings arrive disguised as disappointments." "Crawford rejecting you, you mean?" It wasn't a question. "If he hadn't, I wouldn't be here now, with you." She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "I came to Pine Ridge seeking security, a name for my child. I found so much more." Thomas brushed a strand of hair from her face, his expression tender. "So did I. Never expected to love again after Sarah. Thought that part of life was over for me." Their conversation drifted as night deepened around the cabin, speaking of dreams and possibilities now shared between them. Emma fell asleep in Thomas's arms, more content than she'd been since before James's death, perhaps even more holy than she'd ever been. August brought the first preparations for harvest and winter beyond. Emma worked alongside Thomas in the hayfields, learning to use the scythe and rake with increasing skill. Her body, once soft from city living, had grown stronger, tanned by the mountain sun and hardened by honest labor. She found satisfaction in this physical transformation that matched her inner one, from desperate widow to confident rancher's wife. Martha Johnson visited the ranch one afternoon, bringing news from town, along with a basket of late summer berries for preserving. As the women worked together in the kitchen, Lily playing nearby with fabric scraps Martha had brought for her, conversation turned to the upcoming harvest festival. "You'll bring Thomas, of course," Martha said, as she crushed berries for jam. "Everyone's expecting to see you both." Emma hesitated. Thomas isn't fond of large gatherings. Martha's knowing smile held a hint of mischief. "He might make an exception now. John says he's never seen Miller look so content as when he's talking about his girls in town." Warmth spread through Emma's chest at the thought of Thomas speaking of her and Lily with such affection. "We'll be there," she promised. Martha's expression grew more serious as she lowered her voice, though Lily was too absorbed in her play to listen. "Has there been any trouble with Crawford?" Emma shook her head. "Nothing direct. Thomas says he's been unusually quiet. That's what worries John. Crawford isn't the type to simply accept defeat." Martha wiped berry juice from her fingers. "John's been doing some research into Thomas's past. For his protection," she added hastily. "There are rumors Crawford has been making inquiries in Denver about Thomas's time there." A chill ran through Emma despite the kitchen's warmth. "What kind of inquiries?" "About his association with Jim Hardin." Martha glanced toward Lily again. "John says Hardin's gang was responsible for more than just cattle rustling. There were allegations of stagecoach robberies, though nothing was ever proven against Thomas specifically." Emma frowned. "Thomas told me he never participated in violence, that he served his time for the cattle incident." "I'm sure that's true," Martha assured her. "But Crawford doesn't care about truth, only ammunition. John wanted me to warn you both to be careful." The conversation shifted to lighter topics after that, but Martha's warning lingered in Emma's mind. That evening, after Lily was asleep, she shared the information with Thomas as they sat on the porch, his arm around her shoulders. "Doesn't surprise me," he said after listening quietly. "Crawford's had plenty of time to dig up old stories." Emma turned to face him more fully. "Is there anything I should know? Anything you haven't told me about that time?" Thomas was silent for a long moment. "Rode with Hardin for 8 months. Mostly moved cattle, as I told you, but there were 2 stagecoach robberies during that time. I wasn't directly involved in either, but I knew about them. Didn't report them. His voice held no excuses, just facts. When we were caught with the cattle, the authorities tried to connect us to the stage robberies. Couldn't prove it against most of us. Hardin took most of the blame, served 10 years. And where is Hardin now? Last I heard, running a legitimate freight business in Montana. Thomas's arm tightened around her. That life is long behind me, Emma, but the law has a long memory, as does Crawford. Emma leaned into his embrace. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. Thomas pressed a kiss to her temple. Together. The Harvest Festival arrived in early September, Pine Ridge transformed by decorations celebrating the season's bounty. Fall colors painted the surrounding mountains in brilliant golds and reds, the air carrying the first crisp hint of the winter to come. Emma wore her best dress, newly altered with Martha's help to reflect current fashion. Lily bounced with excitement, her hair ribboned and curled for the special occasion. Thomas, wearing the same vest he'd worn to the spring social, but with a new shirt Emma had made him, seemed more relaxed than he had at the previous gathering. His hand rested comfortably at Emma's back as they made their way through the crowded town square, greeting neighbors and acquaintances. "Mrs. Miller," Dr. Green called, approaching with a smile. "You're looking remarkably well. Ranching clearly agrees with you." Emma returned his smile. "It does, thank you. I've never felt healthier. And Miss Lily has grown at least 2 inches since I last saw her," the doctor observed, bending to the child's level. "Have you been drinking your milk like I recommended?" Lily nodded solemnly. "Father says milk makes strong bones for riding horses." The doctor's eyes twinkled as he straightened. "Your father is absolutely right." He turned to Thomas. "Speaking of whom, Johnson tells me your northern herd is producing some of the finest calves in the county." Thomas nodded, a hint of pride in his normally stoic expression. "Good bloodlines, planning to expand next spring if prices hold." The conversation continued along these lines, ordinary, pleasant discussion of ranch matters and town developments. Emma watched Thomas with quiet joy, noting how much more at ease he seemed compared to previous social interactions. He still wasn't verbose, but he engaged genuinely, no longer holding himself apart from the community. As the afternoon progressed, Emma found herself drawn into conversation with a group of women, while Thomas was pulled away to judge a shooting competition. The women's attitudes had shifted noticeably since the spring social. Where once there had been cautious politeness, now there was genuine inclusion. "Your preserves are legendary already," one homesteader's wife declared. "My Henry won't stop talking about the blackberry jam you traded for that carpentry work." Emma laughed, pleased by the compliment. "I'm considering selling some in town next summer if there's interest." "Oh, there would be," several women assured her at once. Eleanor Parker, their nearest ranch neighbor, added, "You should speak with Johnson about an advertisement in the newspaper. Start taking orders early." The conversation continued, expanding to include Emma's other domestic skills, her sewing, her garden innovations, her methods for preserving vegetables through the harsh mountain winters. She found herself answering questions as an equal, someone with valuable knowledge to share rather than an outsider to be evaluated. As dusk approached, music began. Fiddles, a guitar, and someone's harmonica combining for lively dance tunes in the cleared area at the center of the square. Couples formed sets for reels and squares, children darting between them in their own improvised dances. Emma watched, clapping in time with the music, not expecting Thomas to participate in such festivities. To her surprise, he appeared at her, aside, extending his hand. "Would you dance with me?" he asked, a touch of uncertainty in his expression. Emma stared at him. "You dance?" A small smile touched his lips. "Not often, not well, but I remember the steps to this one." She placed her hand in his, heart full as he led her to join the forming sets. Thomas moved with the same quiet confidence. He showed in all physical tasks, nothing flashy but competent and attentive. His eyes rarely left her face, even when the pattern separated them briefly. During a pause between dances, Sheriff Daniels approached, expression apologetic. "Hate to interrupt, but there's been word from the Double C Ranch. Couple of Crawford's men were seen near your north boundary yesterday, Miller." Thomas frowned. "Doing what?" "Just riding, according to Ben Taylor, but they had no business being that far from Crawford's property." The sheriff's weathered face showed genuine concern. "Might be nothing. Might be worth keeping an eye out." Thomas nodded, his hand tightening slightly around Emma's. "Appreciate the warning." "The..." Sheriff tipped his hat. "Enjoy the rest of the festival. Just thought you should know." As Daniels moved away, Emma searched Thomas's face. "What do you think it means?" "Could be innocent, could be Crawford looking for weaknesses." Thomas's jaw tightened. "We'll ride out tomorrow, check the fences." The news cast a momentary shadow over their evening, but Emma refused to let it linger. "For tonight, let's just enjoy ourselves," she suggested. "We're surrounded by friends. We're safe." Thomas's expression softened as he looked down at her. "You're right." He pulled her slightly closer as the music began again. "One more dance." They stayed later than planned, Lily eventually falling asleep on a bench near Martha Johnson, who assured them she was happy to watch the child while they enjoyed themselves. When they finally gathered their sleeping daughter and headed home, the night was filled with stars and a sense of belonging Emma had once thought forever lost to her. The following morning, they rode out to check the northern boundary as planned. Lily remained at the cabin with firm instructions to stay inside until they returned. Thomas brought his rifle, slung in its saddle holster, not unusual for ranch work where predators were a constant concern, but Emma noted he checked it more carefully than usual. The northern pasture stretched to a line of pine forest that marked the edge of Thomas's property. A creek, nearly dry this late in the season, formed a natural boundary reinforced by split-rail fencing. Thomas dismounted to examine tracks near a section of fence. "Two riders," he confirmed, studying the ground. "Came from the east, followed the fence line for a while, then turned back. Crawford's men?" Thomas straightened. "Can't say for certain, but they weren't just passing through. They were looking for something." Emma scanned the peaceful pasture, the grazing cattle, the distant mountains. It seemed impossible that danger could exist in such a beautiful place. Yet the tracks were undeniable evidence of scrutiny, perhaps even threat. "What would they be looking for?" she asked. Thomas remounted his horse. "Weaknesses," several women assured her at once. Eleanor Parker, their nearest ranch neighbor, added, "You should speak with Johnson about an advertisement in the newspaper. Start taking orders early." The conversation continued, expanding to include Emma's other domestic skills, her sewing, her garden innovations, her methods for preserving vegetables through the harsh mountain winters. She found herself answering questions as an equal, someone with valuable knowledge to share rather than an outsider to be evaluated. As dusk approached, music began, fiddles, a guitar, and someone's harmonica combining for lively dance tunes in the cleared area at the center of the square. Couples formed sets for reels and squares, children darting between them in their own improvised dances. Emma watched, clapping in time with the music, not expecting Thomas to participate in such festivities. To her surprise, he appeared at her side, extending his hand. "Would you dance with me?" he asked, a touch of uncertainty in his expression. Emma stared at him. "You dance?" A small smile touched his lips. "Not often, not well, but I remember the steps to this one." She placed her hand in his, heart full as he led her to join the forming sets. Thomas moved with the same quiet confidence. He showed in all physical tasks, nothing flashy but competent and attentive. His eyes rarely left her face, even when the pattern separated them briefly. During a pause between dances, Sheriff Daniels approached, expression apologetic. "Hate to interrupt, but there's been word from the Double C Ranch. Couple of Crawford's men were seen near your north boundary yesterday, Miller." Thomas frowned. "Doing what?" "Just riding, according to Ben Taylor. But they had no business being that far from Crawford's property." The sheriff's weathered face showed genuine concern. "Might be nothing. Might be worth keeping an eye out." Thomas nodded, his hand tightening slightly around Emma's. "Appreciate the warning." The sheriff tipped his hat. "Enjoy the rest of the festival. Just thought you should know." As Daniels moved away, Emma searched Thomas's face. "What do you think it means?" "Could be innocent. Could be Crawford looking for weaknesses." Thomas's jaw tightened. "We'll ride out tomorrow. Check the fences." The news cast a momentary shadow over their evening, but Emma refused to let it linger. "For tonight, let's just enjoy ourselves," she suggested. "We're surrounded by friends. We're safe." Thomas's expression softened as he looked down at her. "You're right." He pulled her slightly closer as the music began again. "One more dance?" They stayed later than planned, Lily eventually falling asleep on a bench near Martha Johnson, who assured them she was happy to watch the child while they enjoyed themselves. When they finally gathered their sleeping daughter and headed home, the night was filled with stars and a sense of belonging Emma had once thought forever lost to her. The following morning, they rode out to check the northern boundary as planned. Lily remained at the cabin with firm instructions to stay inside until they returned. Thomas brought his rifle, slung in its saddle holster, not unusual for ranch work where predators were a constant concern. But Emma noted he checked it more carefully than usual. The northern pasture stretched to a line of pine forest that marked the edge of Thomas's property. A creek, nearly dry this late in the season, formed a natural boundary reinforced by split-rail fencing. Thomas dismounted to examine tracks near a section of fence. "Two riders," he confirmed, studying the ground. "Came from the east, followed the fence line for a while, then turned back. Crawford's men?" Thomas straightened. "Can't say for certain, but they weren't just passing through. They were looking for something." Emma scanned the peaceful pasture, the grazing cattle, the distant mountains. It seemed impossible that danger could exist in such a beautiful place, yet the tracks were undeniable evidence of scrutiny, perhaps even threat. "What would they be looking for?" she asked. Thomas remounted his horse. "Weaknesses. Why would he want the mercantile as well?" Eleanor's expression was grim. "Control. If he owns both stores, he sets all the prices, and with the Thompson land, his ranch now borders yours to the northeast." The implication was clear. Crawford was expanding his influence, both commercially and physically. His property now directly touched Thomas's, creating a new point of potential conflict. "Has Thomas heard this news?" Emma asked. "Henry planned to tell him tonight," Eleanor confirmed. "That's likely what they're discussing now." The women's conversation shifted to other topics, but Emma's mind remained preoccupied. Crawford's actions seemed calculated, expanding toward their property while simultaneously increasing his economic hold over the town. If he controlled both general stores, those who opposed him would have limited options for necessary supplies. When it was time to leave, Emma noted Thomas's expression had grown more serious. He helped her and a sleepy Lily into the wagon with his usual care, but tension was evident in the set of his shoulders. They rode in silence until they were well away from the Parker Ranch. Finally, Thomas spoke. "Henry told you about Crawford's purchases?" "Eleanor did," Emma confirmed. "What do you think it means?" Thomas's hands tightened on the reins. "Nothing good. The Thompson place has poor grazing, not worth what he paid for it. He wanted it for the boundary with our land. And buying the mercantile? Consolidating power, making sure everyone in Pine Ridge depends on him in some way." Thomas glanced at her, his expression grim in the moonlight. "It's a message to us, and to anyone who'd stand with us." Emma reached for his arm. "What can we do?" "For now, nothing but stay alert. Crawford's playing a waiting game." Thomas covered her hand with his. "Don't worry too much. We've faced challenges before." Despite his reassurance, Emma couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. Crawford's actions were those of a man implementing a calculated strategy, not someone who had accepted defeat and moved on. They arrived home to find everything as they'd left it, the cabin secure and quiet. After putting Lily to bed, Emma joined Thomas on the porch despite the cold. The stars overhead were brilliant in the clear mountain air, the silence profound. "I won't let him threaten what we've built," Thomas said quietly, his arm around her shoulders. "This home, our family." Emma leaned into his embrace, drawing strength from his solid presence. "I know." They stood together in the darkness. Two people who had found each other against all odds, now facing a threat neither had anticipated when they'd entered their arrangement of convenience. What had begun as a practical solution to their separate problems had evolved into something worth fighting for, a genuine family, a true home, a love that had grown naturally from respect and kindness. Whatever Crawford might plan, Emma knew with certainty that she and Thomas would face it together with all the strength and resilience that had brought them to this point. The first heavy snow of winter arrived 3 days after Lily's birthday celebration. Emma stood at the kitchen window, watching white flakes transform the world outside into a pristine landscape. Normally, the season's first snowfall brought her a sense of peace. The world tucked in for winter rest, the cabin warm and secure against the elements. Today, however, unease shadowed her appreciation of nature's beauty. Thomas had ridden out at dawn to check the cattle in the lower pasture, promising to return before midday. The snow had begun unexpectedly early, and though he knew these mountains better than anyone, Emma couldn't quiet her concern. Lily sat at the table behind her, carefully stringing dried berries for Christmas decorations, humming a tune Thomas had taught her. "When will Father be home?" she asked, not for the first time that morning. Emma turned from the window with a reassuring smile. "Soon, sweetheart." The snow probably slowed him down a bit. As if summoned by her words, she heard the muffled sound of hoofbeats approaching. Relief flooded through her as she moved to the door, but it froze in her chest when she saw not one rider but 3 emerging from the curtain of snow. Thomas rode in front, his expression grim. Behind him came Sheriff Daniels and another man Emma didn't recognize, thin and official-looking despite his snow-dusted coat. "Lily, stay inside," Emma instructed, her voice steady despite her racing. "Art?" She stepped onto the porch, pulling her shawl tight against the cold. When they were finally alone, Emma sank into a chair, the full weight of the situation settling on her shoulders. 15 years ago. How can you possibly prove where you were? Thomas sat beside her, taking her hands in his. "I was working a ranch near Boulder. Have to see if anyone there remembers, might still have records." He squeezed her fingers gently. "We'll fight this, Emma. And if we lose, if they convict you..." He didn't flinch from the question. "Stage robbery with violence carries 10 years minimum, possibly worse." Emma closed her eyes against the threatening tears. 10 years. Lily would be 14 before Thomas returned. Their life together, so carefully built, would be shattered. "I won't let that happen," she said fiercely, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. "Crawford has orchestrated this entire thing out of spite and wounded pride. There must be a way to expose that." Thomas's expression softened as he reached up to touch her cheek. "My brave Emma, always ready to fight. For our family, always." She leaned into his touch. "We need to speak with Johnson." If anyone can help gather information on Crawford's movements, his meeting with Hardin, it would be him. Thomas nodded. I'll ride into town tomorrow, weather permitting. That night, after Lily was asleep, they sat before the fire discussing strategies. Thomas would need to travel to Boulder to search for evidence of his whereabouts during the robbery. Emma would work with Martha and John Johnson to investigate Crawford's recent activities, particularly his trip to Montana. I should go with you to Denver, Emma insisted. Your wife's presence in court would speak to your character. Thomas shook his head. Someone needs to stay with Lily, and the ranch needs tending. The Parkers would watch Lily, and the ranch can survive a week without us. She took his hands. I won't let you face this alone, Thomas. His resistance crumbled under her determination. All right, but only if we can arrange proper care for Lily and the stock. The following weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Thomas made the difficult journey to Boulder, returning with affidavits from his former employer and 2 co-workers who remembered him working the ranch during the time of the robbery. John Johnson's investigations revealed that Crawford had indeed visited Montana just weeks before filing the charges and had withdrawn a substantial sum from his bank prior to the trip. It's circumstantial, Johnson warned when they gathered in his newspaper office. Suggests Crawford bribed Hardin, but doesn't prove it. What about the witness who supposedly saw Thomas at the robbery? Emma asked. Johnson's expression was grim. A man named Tucker, former drifter who now works as foreman at Crawford's ranch. Convenient, isn't it? Thomas leaned forward. I need to speak with Hardin directly, convince him to tell the truth. Too risky, Sheriff Daniels objected. If Crawford has paid Hardin to lie, confronting him could make things worse. He might claim you threatened him. The discussion continued late into the evening, weighing options and risks. Throughout it all, Emma was struck by the support surrounding them. The sheriff, the Johnsons, Dr. Green, who had joined them later, all willing to stand against Crawford's influence on Thomas's behalf. Whatever happens, Martha said quietly as Emma prepared to leave, you're not alone in this fight. The journey to Denver was arduous in early December, snow making the mountain passes treacherous. They left Lily in the Parkers' capable care, the ranch temporarily managed by a trusted hand recommended by Sheriff Daniels. Emma felt the separation from her daughter keenly, but knew their fight for Thomas's freedom took precedence over all else. Denver bustled with activity despite the winter weather, the territorial capital growing rapidly with the influx of mining wealth and eastern businesses. They took rooms at a modest hotel near the courthouse, saving their limited funds for legal expenses. Thomas had retained a lawyer recommended by Johnson, Edward Winters, a young but determined attorney with experience in frontier justice. The prosecution's case relies entirely on testimony from compromised witnesses, Winters explained during their first meeting. But juries can be unpredictable, especially with charges involving violence. There was a guard injured in the robbery, Thomas explained to Emma later. Not killed, but badly hurt. Makes the charges more serious. The court date arrived cold and clear, the December sun providing light but little warmth. Emma wore her best dress, her hand tucked firmly in Thomas's arm as they entered the imposing courthouse. Crawford was already there, seated near the front with a smug satisfaction that made Emma's blood boil. The proceedings began with the prosecutor outlining the case against Thomas, his known association with Hardin's gang, the witness testimony. Placing him at the scene, the signed statement from Hardin himself implicating Thomas in planning the robbery. Winters countered with evidence of Thomas's whereabouts during the robbery, character testimony from Sheriff Daniels and Dr. Green, who had traveled to Denver for the trial, and documentation of Thomas's clean record since serving his time for The cattle incident, 15 years earlier. The court should question why these charges emerge now, 15 years after the fact, Winters argued. Only after my client's recent marriage and when the primary accuser has received mysterious financial windfall. Emma sat rigid throughout the proceedings, her eyes never leaving Thomas as he testified in his own defense. He spoke honestly about his past mistakes, his association with Harden, but firmly denied any involvement in the stagecoach robbery. I made poor choices as a young man, he told the court. Paid for them with jail time and years rebuilding my reputation. I've created an honest life, a family. His gaze found Emma's. I wouldn't jeopardize that for anything. The trial lasted 3 grueling days. Emma hardly slept, spending nights discussing strategy with Thomas and Winters, praying for a favorable outcome. On the final day, as the jury began deliberations, Thomas took her hands in the empty courtroom. Whatever happens, he said quietly, know that meeting you and Lily was the best thing in my life. You gave me a second chance at happiness I never thought I'd have. Emma blinked back tears. This isn't over. I won't let Crawford win. The jury's deliberations stretched into evening. As they waited, Crawford approached, his expression a mask of false concern. Miller? Mrs. Miller, a difficult waiting period, I imagine. Emma stiffened. Why are you doing this? Haven't you caused enough pain? Crawford's polite veneer slipped slightly. Actions have consequences. Your husband should have thought of that before interfering in my affairs, first with that half-breed boy, then with you. This isn't justice, Emma said coldly. It's petty. Revenge. Call it what you will. Crawford straightened his already immaculate lapels. But either way, Miller will pay for his past, and you'll learn the cost of rejecting better offers. As he walked away, Emma fought the urge to call him, back to scream the truth of his manipulations to the entire courthouse. Thomas's hand on her arm steadied her. He wants to provoke us, he murmured. Don't give him the satisfaction. When the jury finally returned, Emma could hardly breathe. Thomas stood tall beside her, his face betraying no fear, though she could feel the tension in his body. In the matter of the territory versus Thomas Miller on charges of conspiracy and robbery, we find the defendant not guilty. The words seemed to hang in the air for an eternal moment before their meaning registered. Not guilty. Thomas was free. Crawford's scheme had failed. The courtroom erupted in congratulations from their supporters. Emma found herself embraced by Martha Johnson, tears streaming down both their faces. Over Martha's shoulder, she saw Crawford's expression of cold fury before he stormed from the courtroom. That night, in the privacy of their hotel room, the full emotional impact finally hit. Emma collapsed into Thomas's arms, relief and exhaustion overwhelming her. It's over, Thomas murmured, holding her close. We can go home. But a shadow of concern lingered in Emma's mind. Crawford won't accept this defeat easily. He'll try something else. Thomas tilted her face up to his. Maybe, but we've shown we can't be intimidated. That we'll fight. His expression softened. And we have allies now. We're not alone. The journey home was lighter despite the winter conditions. Relief and anticipation lending warmth against the December chill. As they crested the final rise overlooking Aspen Creek Ranch, the cabin came into view, smoke curling invitingly. From the chimney, where Eleanor Parker was keeping the home fires burning for their return, Emma reached for Thomas's hand across the wagon seat. When I stepped off that stagecoach in Pine Ridge, she said quietly, I thought I knew what I needed. Security, respectability, a name for my child. I had no idea what I truly wanted. Thomas squeezed her fingers. And what was that? This. She gestured to the ranch, the home they'd built together. A true partnership. Respect. Love that grows from understanding rather than obligation. Thomas's rare, full smile transformed his face. Crawford did us a favor in his way. If he'd accepted you that first day, I would never have found you, Emma finished. Sometimes rejection is just life's way of steering us toward what we truly deserve. As they approached the cabin, the door flew open and Lily raced out, her face alight with joy. Father! Mama! You're home! Thomas swept the child up in his arms, holding her close as Emma joined the embrace. Standing there, in the winter sunlight, arms wrapped around her family, Emma knew with absolute certainty that all the hardship had been worth it. What had begun as a desperate arrangement, a marriage of convenience born from rejection and necessity, had blossomed into something far more precious, a love strong enough to withstand any challenge, a family built on choice rather than circumstance, and a home where all of them truly belonged. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.